Sky. Watch every live Premier League game this season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it? Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Welcome along to Thursday night's football show. It's Richie McCormack here with you, and I'm delighted to say that we've got John Giles along for the duration. John, very good evening to you.
And you, Richie.
Winter's closing in. The games are kind of piling up upon us, and this has been one of those weeks where I think there hasn't been a day's rest, essentially, in terms of games and matches and stuff to keep tabs on. We'll have to take ourselves all the way back to Saturday, John, because when you contrast the events of the weekend with the action that we saw in the Champions League, specifically from three teams in Liverpool, Spurs and Chelsea, they couldn't have had more differing outings, really, in terms of how the results went for them. Spurs, I guess, is probably the outlier because they actually managed to win on Saturday. But we'll start with Liverpool. It's really difficult to try and get your head around their season at the moment, because in the league they keep faltering against these teams that they quote-unquote shouldn't falter against. The most recent, of course, being Leeds last Saturday. And they've obviously lost to Forest already. They've managed to beat Manchester City. And again, in midweek, like Napoli, in many people's eyes, are probably the best and most informed team in Europe right now. The goals they've scored in the Champions League, the players they have performing at the top level at the moment, flying in Serie A, and Liverpool managed to go and play well and beat them. How do you get your head around such a schizophrenic week in Liverpool Football Club?
It's very, very difficult. Lucky enough, it ended up with a win for them in the European matches during the week. But very inconsistent. I mean, when you go back on what Liverpool have been doing in the last 5, 6, 7 years, it's been really, really good and very consistent. Last year they might have won 4 trophies. You'd want to be in the club to know exactly what has changed, Richie. You know, I think Klopp was a great manager, but he did say certain things at the start of the season when he was bringing the players back. He wanted to give them an extra week. It was, they played a lot of matches, and sometimes if you're saying things like that as a manager, it does get into the players' heads, because you never know in football. It can be the slightest thing that puts a team off from winning matches like they're winning or going particularly well. It happens. But they're very, very inconsistent. They got a win during the week, which puts them back into the playoffs in the Champions League, which is good. But the Leeds match was a huge surprise. I mean, Leeds hadn't been playing well, as we know. They've been playing very, very badly, and to go and play at Anfield the way they did, you'd have to ask the question: now, why don't they play like that every week? But they did. I didn't expect them to win. I don't think anybody expected them to win. But they did and deserved to win it, because Liverpool just weren't at their best or anywhere near their best. And it's added to the consistency, as you said early on, Richie, to lose at Notts Forest, to beat Manchester City, first of all, where they played really well, and then be beaten by the two teams near the bottom of the league was a huge surprise. That's usually attitude. If you play against the top teams, you're up for it, as they say. When you play against the bottom teams, you're not up for it as much as you should. But Liverpool at their best were up every match, no matter who they were playing, top of the league or bottom of the league, and that hasn't happened. So, they find themselves in the position that they're in now, which is not Liverpool anyway, that's for sure.
No, it's certainly not. They're now in a battle essentially to qualify for the Champions League, and they would have had their eyes potentially on winning the league, I guess, again this season, and it's now going to be a battle for the top 4, which is only going to intensify because you have teams that are there now currently occupying those spaces who haven't been in previous and most recent years. The likes of Newcastle are in around there, the likes of Arsenal are suddenly showing themselves to be a force. So it kind of really puts them on the back foot in terms of the second half of the season to put together a string of results coming off the back of a World Cup on top of that as well, to try and get back into the top 4.
Well, it's very difficult to do it, Richie. Liverpool have to be on it from the start of the season, and they haven't been the Liverpool that we know. Now, they have to go on a terrific run. It's possible, but it's a very, very difficult thing to do. You can't suddenly turn it on. I mean, they've played a good few matches now. It hasn't been the Liverpool team that players that we know in previous seasons. To be beaten by the teams that they have been beaten is unbelievable, really, as far as Liverpool are concerned, being so consistent. So, as you say, there's other teams coming into it. Arsenal have come into it, Newcastle have come into it, that you wouldn't expect them to. Man U might make a bit of a comeback to come into the top four as well. So it's not going to be easy for Liverpool. I mean, they want to get back to where they were in previous seasons, as we know, they've been a great team. To get back to that, to qualify for Europe next year, I think winning the league is not on their radar or anybody else's radar for this season.
In terms of Liverpool, like there was a couple of those stats came out after the Leeds game, whereby, and this kind of takes me back to Ten Hag's first days in charge of Manchester United, whereby Leeds outran Liverpool, like the collective amount of yards covered, essentially, or kilometres covered. Like Leeds ran 11 kilometres more, so what, another 8 miles or so more than Liverpool during the course of the game. They made more high intensity kind of presses than Liverpool. Like that, from a Liverpool side that had made their name on outrunning teams, on outpressing teams, on outworking them in terms of energy, it's a hell of a drop off to, with the greatest of respect, to be falling that short of Leeds, who had gone and lost 6 of their last 8 and hadn't won in their last 8 games.
Well, there's no. I couldn't tell you why, Richie. To be honest,
I think that's baffling a lot of people now as well. It's kind of a cumulative effect of a bunch of little tiny things, and to put to try and plug that many gaps and holes in a boat with one hand is a very difficult thing to do. So try and explain it as well is very, very tricky. So it shows the problem that they have in trying to get themselves back together and get to the point where they were last season.
The thing is, for every in my experience anyway, you have to be, as Graham Souness says, up for it every week. Yeah, you have to be up for it every week. And my take on it is now, when I was playing at Leeds, we were winning things. The attitude was, my attitude was, and even most of the other players, if you're playing against one of the bottom teams, your attitude has to be, we have to try better than they do. We have to make it more awkward now for them, rather than doing it to... The only way they can beat you is if your attitude is not right and they're going to play harder than you're going to play. Now, so you don't allow that. You play from the first go harder than them. Because when you play the top teams, like say at Leeds, we're playing Liverpool at home. We know this is going to be a big game. So you're up for it. You don't have to kid yourself to get up for it. You're up for it. This is Liverpool. This is what you have to do. But if you're playing one of the bottom teams, right, you have to get up for it even more, because you have to make yourself do it. When you play against Liverpool at home, you're nervous, you're up for it, you're ready to go, right? But you have to do that. You have to make yourself do it. And Liverpool haven't, like a perfect example of Liverpool this season, they were really good against Manchester City. Really good against Manchester City. Then they go to Notts Forest. They're not up for it in the same way. Leeds come to, they're not up for it in the same way. So it's that attitude. That's when you talk about what happened to Liverpool. Well, what happened to Liverpool was they weren't up for it at home as much as Liverpool, as much as they were against Manchester City. You know, because when you're playing a top team, you're naturally up for it. Do you know what I mean, Richie? I don't know if I'm explaining.
No, absolutely.
Very well.
I get the. No, it's kind of, I think, a natural impulse on a player's behalf or a manager's behalf to think that these are the teams around us, these are the teams immediately in our vicinity, and these are the teams that we will need to be at our absolute apex to beat. Whereas you do have that, like, as much as anybody wants to be a professional, they will have in the back of their mind of, this is only Leeds, or this is only Nottingham Forest, or this is only whomever it happens to be, and we'll always have enough to get by. And suddenly when you find yourself being outrun, you're in a rut, and it's like you're running in treacle.
You don't have that nervous, like, you know, when I was playing, we were playing Liverpool at home, from the time you get up, you get this nervous feeling. So when it comes to the kick-off time, you're up for it. But and it shouldn't happen, like, but when you're playing against the likes of, say, Leeds this season, the way they were, they're down near the bottom, they were beaten, they're not going well. You don't have that nervous feeling that's automatic. You have to make that up. You have to make them say, well, like, I have to be up for this. as soon as they get the ball, we've got to make it awkward, because the only way we can lose is if we don't play as hard as they play.
Yeah.
That's the only way you can do it. And then that attitude obviously wasn't there for the matches that we saw. Leeds deserve to be, not Forest, but certainly we're in the run as well.
Yeah.
So, and then you got the Manchester City match in between, because they know, the players know, well, if we play Manchester City and we're not up for it, we're going to get a hiding here.
Obviously, Leeds didn't win that game in a vacuum. They had to go out and as you would say yourself, do their stuff, and deserved the win. Like, it wasn't, I know it was a last minute winner or an injury time winner from Crescencio Summerville, but they worked. There was chances for.
They'd be up for it, Richie.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Leeds would be up for it. The Leeds players would be scared stiff, really, going to Liverpool. So their attitude would be, if we don't do our stuff here, we're going to get a hiding.
Yeah.
Right, so that's the attitude you need week in, week out, week in, week out. And that's what the consistency of Liverpool have been over the previous seasons. It's not there this year. I mean, not Forest beating them and Leeds beating them. Yeah. And in between times, they beat the best team, what's probably the best team in the country, in Manchester City.
Yeah, and probably the best team in Europe for the week. Yeah.
That counts.
On Leeds, like, I remember sitting here in the wake of the Chelsea results, the win against Chelsea that ultimately brought about Tuchel's sacking a couple of weeks later, and now we're sitting here as well where they've won at Liverpool. Like, in between, they did have that run of 8 games where they couldn't pick up a win to save their lives. They lost 6 of those, and like, what do you put that down to? Like, in terms of, I know you said that they were scared and they wanted to go and put out a performance. But there's clearly ability within that Leeds side. Why have they been so inconsistent this year?
Yeah, well, it's going back to the Bielsa days. I mean, they're pretty much playing the same way as Bielsa was there, which is go, go, go. You know what I mean? But what I find when they played Crystal Palace a couple of weeks ago with Leeds, and the first 20 minutes they were brilliant. Absolutely, we played them off the pitch. There was a pace to them. There was a go on the definitely very, very good. They went one up, right? But it's very difficult to maintain that pace for the 90 minutes. So they don't have it. Same with Bielsa. When they were winning, like they were against Crystal Palace, for example, right? They're one up. They go. They need to get 2 or 3 up, because they don't know how to slow the game down, Richie, in my opinion. Right. Like, in other words, when you go 1 up or 2 up, you can play in a slightly different way. But Leeds don't. Leeds are go, go, go for the 90 minutes, and it's very hard to maintain that pace. Now, they did it well against Liverpool. Well, they went on top for the 90 minutes, but they kept the pace going, and Liverpool didn't match them in that particular way. So in Leeds' case, that's why they'll be inconsistent, Leeds. When they're 2 up, there's a certain way of handling the game. Do you know what I mean? Which you hold it. The opposition then now have to... Yeah, do you know what I mean? You have to slow it down a bit, and then you've got the 2 goals up, right? So the other team have to come at you, right? You don't encourage them to come at you, but when they do come at you, you have to have the stamina left to hold on to that. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're not going to be scoring 4 and 5 when you're on top. If you get 2 up, but that's the way the game goes. You have to know how to run the game from then on, handle the game. 2-0 up. Okay, we can play a little bit slower now. We can keep possession of the ball. Let them charge around. Let them make mistakes, because they get desperate to get back in front, and then you kill them off doing it that way. Whereas Leeds is go, 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 go all the time. Now, they were very good against. That's why there'll be an inconsistency about Leeds, in my opinion, because they don't defend very well normally. Do you think that when they're on top, they're on top? You know.
Do you think they'll do enough to stay up this season?
I think they will.
Right.
I think they will. You know, I think I think once he gets them playing with the attitude that's been there before when Bielsa was there, that's what Bielsa did. You know, but there'll be games where they'll run out of steam. That'll be the fear I would have for Leeds winning matches. The pace that they go at, and it's very, very good. They need to be scoring a few goals at that pace, because what they expect of them is that pace for 90 minutes. And it's very, very difficult to do that. If you're 2 up, in other words, you've got to handle the game from then. A little bit slow it down a little bit. Let them come chasing. Let them make the mistakes. That's the way I see Leeds. So it's all or nothing with them. And when it's going for them, like against Liverpool, they're very, very good. But as you say, they lost, 5 or 6 matches before that?
Yeah.
Without looking anyway good at all.
Even
so
from
they're being inconsistent, I think. I think they're being inconsistent.
Even from a mental standpoint, it has to be pretty taxing to play like basically 90 odd minutes in fifth gear the whole time.
Yeah.
Like that, it's mentally it's got to take it out of you as well as physically.
Oh yeah, some days it'll work, some days it won't work. You know what I mean? That's football. Like obviously with the great teams, in my opinion, when they're on top. They score a certain amount of goals, but then you run the game in relation to the score. Right? You say you go 2-0 up, then you can play in a certain way. You can hold the ball, get the other team running around. Then you nick another one, right? Because they're looking to get at you. But when you're go, like it was like when Bielsa was there, they'd win matches, some great matches, 3-0. Next week they'd be beaten 3-0. And they haven't. That was the best they've played, in my opinion. They played well against Chelsea, which is 8 games ago, and then they become inconsistent. You know, they had a bad run, and I fear for them in that way. I think they'll do enough to stay up, but I think it'll be a little bit of a scary season for them.
A bit of a harem-scarum one. What has been harem-scarum in the last few weeks has been Spurs' season. I mean, everything seemed to be pretty rosy. They looked like they were on course to be, a comfortable top 4 side for a spell. They hit that sticky patch of 3 games without a win in all competitions. There was the draw against Sporting. And then last Saturday, they found themselves 2-0 down to Bournemouth. And people were kind of going, there's something seriously awry here. They come back and win 3-2, and then again we see on Tuesday night that they were really put to the pin of their collar by Marseille, and probably deserved on balance to perhaps lose that game, and won it. It shows the game of kind of inches that we exist in here, whereby that this week could have been a complete disaster and a complete washout for Tottenham. They could have been out of the Champions League. They could have lost to Bournemouth and seen their top 4 hopes blown asunder. And yet here we are on the back of 2 wins, and you're kind of going, well, they've done enough to get through this week, and they can only build on this.
Well, that's Conte. You see, I think Conte, with the players he has at Spurs, are getting much more out of them, Richie, than's actually there. You know, I know they got Son up front and they got Kane, but if you look at the rest of the team, like workmanlike, I mean, there's no doubt the Conte team will work really hard, Richie, and that's where they're getting the results from. You know, they haven't got brilliant players. There's a few good players. Two players up front are terrific, but you know, the players that you see in, he hasn't spent a lot of money, and I think what he's getting from them is only Conte could get from them what they're given. You know, that's why I always said I thought, like, he would have been made, in my opinion, for Manchester United. You know, I mean, if he got the same attitude from the Manchester United players, talent players that he's getting from Spurs to be a real team, now maybe the new man at Manchester United will get there. But Conte got there with Spurs without spending an awful lot of money. Normally you have to spend a lot of money to get to where they're at, because they're very, very hard to beat, because this fella's a real pro in getting the best out of them. They were two behind, weren't they? Was it against Bournemouth or Brighton Bournemouth, I think.
Bournemouth, yeah.
And they finished up winning, and as I said, they got a win the other day as well. You know, it's only him that can do that, in my opinion, with the players that he has, with the amount of talent or lack of talent that he has. It's only him that can do it. And that's why I think if Levy puts his hand in his pocket, you know, this season, at the close season, I think he'll take them to winning situations if he gets the players in.
You can see them winning trophies under Conte?
Yes. If he gets, you know, Levy, as we know at Spurs, doesn't believe in spending an awful lot of money. I think this fella's done miracles with the players that he's got and the lack of money that he's got. I think if Levy says, okay, we're going to back you, we're going to give you X amount of guy, I think they'll be on a winner.
I think that the testament to him at the moment has been that he turned, like the signings that he has made. I think a lot of people, when he got the 2 lads in from Juventus last year, Bentancur and Kulusevski, people kind of went, okay, they're not exactly what you call marquee signings, you know. And I think Christian Romero is probably one of those from Atalanta as well, where people went, all right, I've heard a bit about him, maybe he's all right. And these guys have actually turned out to be the fulcrums of Conte's side, and he completely knew what he was doing in signing them, because they're kind of his generals on the pitch. Like they're the kind of players that will enact whatever he wants his vision of football on the pitch to be.
It's attitude, Richie. You know, I mean, that's why I say he's doing the best. Like going back a little bit, I think Manchester United were mad not to take him, and they made some funny comments. You know, about Conte, that he wasn't this and he wasn't that. That was it. What they said, actually, coming from Manchester United, was he doesn't suit the players that we have.
Yeah.
You know, well, Conte can work with players and get them to do whatever he wants. You know, in other words, it was the wrong way round. They were saying that we haven't got the players. The Manchester United players don't suit what he does. Well, he dominates the players and gets them to do what he does. So with the talent that he has at Old Trafford, in my opinion, he would have been a huge success there. But that's another day's work. Yeah. What he's done at Spurs, as you said, the players that he's got in, they haven't been high spending. He hasn't been high spending in any way. But look what he gets from them. And that's all managers can do. You know, if managers have top-class players, then they're a top-class team, you know, or better than that. Like what he's done in the transfer market has been bought good players, but he hasn't spent an awful lot of money. But they're doing the job, and they're doing a big job for him, because that's what he has. He's that type of character.
I think it was Alan Shearer after the Bournemouth game said that their problem on Saturday was that they were bullied for large portions of that match, and I think the same could be said to a degree of the Marseille game. Marseille played through them an awful lot on Tuesday night, and that will be a concern, I guess, regardless of the results going forward, that they have been gotten at in games that they've still won, that they've shown signs of weakness that others and better teams, I guess, than Marseille and Bournemouth can pick apart in later games.
Yeah, they don't have the best players, Richie. That's what I'm saying. But because of their attitude, or his attitude that he expects from them, he gets it. You know, they were 2 down, he gets back at them. You see other teams that collapse in that situation. But any teams that he's had, don't forget, he went to Chelsea. He was only 2 seasons at Chelsea, and he won the league and the cup with them. You know, like he's a winner, and he gets carried away. Of course he does, and he's on the line and he's hopping around and all that. But he's demanding of the players. If you look at what Spurs were before he got there to what they are now, that's the only way you judge a manager. They're a blooming better team now, and they'll get results and fight back like they did in the last 2 matches, Richie. Again, if he had the talent that was there at Manchester United, you know, and get the best out of them. That's the problem with Manchester United. Is nobody's got the best out of them for the last few years. Yeah, and he'd have to be in charge. Yeah. He'd have to be in charge of it. Who he gets in. That.
It's probably a bigger operation. They probably wouldn't want to cede as much control to him as Spurs would probably be happy to at Conte. In terms of where Spurs go from here, like the other side of that is people have been critical of Conte for being overly cautious with some of the Spurs players that he has at his disposal. Is that a criticism that's fair to level at him?
No, because they're not that good. You know, like if he had the talent that, say, Liverpool had at his disposal, and you'd say, well, the players. But I think he's getting more out of the players than anybody could. You know, if you look at the team, and there's some good, they're really good pros, but the attitude he has, Richie, is down to him. What they're third in the table. They're not that far behind the top teams, Manchester City, and Arsenal not that far behind. With what? You know, I mean, if you looked at him and his team and said, well, even the Arsenal team, how many Spurs players would get into that team? But obviously Harry Kane would and Son would. Yeah. But a lot of them are just ordinary good pros, and he has them good pros. But he's getting the most out of them, and that's all managers can do. Get the best players out of the players he has at his disposal.
We'll get back to Son in a few minutes, John. Stay with us there, because our football coverage on Off the Ball is brought to you by Sky. Watch all the football you love, including the biggest Premier League games, every weekend live on Sky. We've more from John on the way about the forthcoming World Cup, of course, and we'll touch on Chelsea's week 2, which has been similarly topsy-turvy, and it's all after these.
Football on Off the Ball
with Sky. Don't miss Spurs versus Liverpool on Super Sunday, live only on Sky Sports.
This is News Talk. Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, don't miss Spurs versus Liverpool on Super Sunday. Live only on Sky Sports.
This is News Talk.
Yeah, welcome back to the Football Show. It's Richie here with you. I'm delighted to say still joining us on the line is John Giles. John, it was hard to fathom Chelsea's week as well, because they went out in midweek and kind of did the job against Dinamo Zagreb last night, which was pretty much as expected. What wasn't expected was Graham Potter going back to Brighton last weekend and getting absolutely hammered. And from a Brighton side who had, they performed well against Liverpool in Ricardo De Zerbi's first game in charge, but since then they'd struggled to create chances and to put them away, certainly. And they did that with gusto against Graham Potter and Chelsea last weekend.
Well, he's Potter. I thought the crowd were very unfair to Potter going back. I think they were booing him off the place, having a go at him. I mean, he's done a great job for them. He's moved on, but that's what he's left behind.
Yeah.
But he's gone to Chelsea now. It's a different day's work altogether, Richie. I think what he has there, he has a lot of talent, but he hasn't got a team, and it'll take him time to get to know the players. I think there's a lot of talent there, and I think he's done a really good job at Brighton. So I think he will do well, but I think it'll take him a bit more time, Richie.
In terms of Potter, he, judging from starting 11 to starting 11 during his time at Chelsea so far, there've been so many changes, and that kind of speaks to your point, I guess, whereby he's assessing this squad before they all disseminate and go off to the World Cup, and he's getting to see 45 minutes here, 60 minutes here, 90 minutes there from pretty much everybody. And Dennis Zakaria was probably the most recent one of those in midweek, scoring on his debut, and taking a while to get his debut. But he's getting a look at everybody, and he's giving everybody enough rope, I think, in his first few weeks in charge. Yeah, I think you have to do that, Richie, because all managers, anybody, say, well, I think this is my best team. But you don't know until you see them play, right? And then you say, no, it wasn't. So that takes one match out of the way. Then there's somebody else. You think, he's not good. It'll take him I think it takes about 8 to 10 matches, Richie, to really get to know him. Because that was my experience when I went to West Brom. It took me at least 8 matches to know what was my best team. Because you think, well, I think he could do that. But you don't know till you see it. And he's got a lot of star players there, and he's given them a chance. But you have to do that. That was my experience with players. Because I was talking about West Brom when I was manager there, because I played against most of those players for about 10 years. Yeah. And there was players there that were better than I thought they would be, and players not as good as I thought they would be. Sure. But you only know by playing them. And that's what he's doing. That's why you get inconsistent performances or inconsistent results. And it's up to himself there. You know after 8 to 10 matches, right, is he going to do it? Is he not going to do it? It's unusual in the modern day to see that level of patience afforded to a manager, though, whether he's new in the job or not. That it's not, you're not saying, well, I'm going to set results aside, because clearly he's made changes during the middle of games to go and get a result if things weren't going his way. But to be able to have the patience from your bosses to say, well, I'm going to try these out. Results mightn't be 100%, but we'll do our utmost to get there. And the crowd essentially going along with it as well, and letting a manager new to the job figure things out that way. Yeah, well, if you look at what he's doing, he's not losing every match. You know what I mean? That's like, you can win a match when you're a new manager. Like, he could win a match, but still see players that have helped to win you the match. No, that's not what I thought he was. Like, you don't have to lose every match. I mean, okay, he was beaten at Brighton last week, and then he goes in the European match and wins the match. So he's been winning matches in between the team not playing so well, but he's getting to know every match that he's playing in, that this is what I want. No, that's not what I really want. So that's the way it works in management. He's got a lot of talent there, which, as we know, and he's got to make the best use of that talent. But he'll only get to know how to make the best use of them by watching them play and see how they do. That takes that little bit of time. But he can be, like, he got a good win the other night. He's won a few matches. But if he's going to do what he wants to do, he has to see them. He's not good in practice, these practice matches. You have to see them out there. And that's what you find with all managers, in my opinion. Yeah. I think he can do it. No, he can't do it. But you can only really find out
by putting the team out that you think is going to win, and then you realise, no, that's not so good.
God, there's a real litmus test coming up for him on the next two games. I mean, he's got Arsenal on Saturday, and then just before the World Cup in midweek, they've got Manchester City. So if ever there's going to be an examination for Graham Potter, it's going to be those two games.
Yeah. Well, you have to put up with him for that. There's very few managers come in and start winning matches and go on and win things. You know what I mean, Richie? Like that's most unusual. The usual pattern is get the players in. He's a lot of talented players down, but he's got to find out what's he like. Or what you have an idea, I think that, but you don't know till you actually see them play. But I think he's done a big job at Brighton, a different type of job. Now it's only time we'll know whether he can do it or not. In the next 4 months, 5 months.
And what a mental few months we've got coming up, John, because we've got the World Cup landing in our laps. I think it's 3 weeks from today. We're gonna have that. We saw from a Chelsea standpoint, they lost Ben Chilwell last night to injury. Looks like he's going to be missing for England during the World Cup. Heung-min Son picked up that cheekbone injury for Spurs away to Marseille. He's going to be in a race against time to be fit for South Korea. More than likely, you would figure he's not going to actually make it. Timo Werner for RB Leipzig in Germany. He's not going to be there. It was announced this afternoon as well. Players are dropping like flies ahead of this World Cup, and to my eyes anyway, it just highlights the folly of this misadventure in the Middle East over the course of the next month and a half, 2 months, because it's just, from every way, shape and form, it just seems off. It just seems wrong. I don't know what your view on it is.
Oh, definitely, Richie. Yeah. That's why the players are getting injuries now. They're playing too many matches now to get ready for the World Cup in the middle of a season.
Yeah, to make space for the World Cup, essentially, yeah.
Yeah, and they're going, and the top players now are going to suffer again, because it's the top players will be playing for the top countries that will go longer and play more matches in the World Cup. So that's why you'll find, Manchester United players, Manchester City players, Chelsea players. You'll find they're the top players in the world, playing for different countries. They'll be playing more matches than anybody else. And you can see the injuries now, because they're packing the matches in to get them in for the World Cup. I mean, they're playing far too many matches, Richie. It's not fair. I know the players are well paid now, and people say, yeah, well, that's okay, they should be. But if you're playing, all human beings, no matter how much they're being paid, if you're playing too many matches, you're going to get injuries. And I think they're piling up here already. That's before you get to the World Cup.
There's a massive list of players. Like, we haven't even mentioned the half dozen or so French players that aren't going to be there, whether it's N'Golo Conte, whether it's Paul Pogba, whether they've got Raphael Varane is going to be a doubt for them as well. They've got the sundry players that are going to be missing, and most teams, I think, are in that position. And I'm just wondering, when you're coming into these last two games before a World Cup, before a World Cup in the middle of a season, that has to be playing on players' minds that I could pick up an injury here that could rule me out for the next month and stop me playing for Brazil or for England or for Germany or South Korea or whoever it is.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. I mean, it's happening anyway. You can see the players going down, as you say. Chilwell got injured the other day. There's just too many matches, and people say, well, they're well paid, and this has nothing to do with money. This is a physical thing for players. No matter how much money you're being paid, if you're playing too many matches, you're going to get injuries. And it's not right. I mean, the whole thing was wrong. Whoever decided to do it, to have the World Cup in the middle of a season in a hot country, it's crazy stuff. Yeah. And you have the players getting injured before the World Cup. And what about in the World Cup itself? And then they've got to come back and play a second half of the season. Like, it's total madness.
Starting on Stevenson's day as well. It's just God knows what state the pitches will be in, going from the dry, hard pitches of Qatar back into slightly more sodden pitches back in England.
I think they'll be all right in that. I think the conditions in Qatar will be perfect.
Right.
That country will be out to show itself at its best. So I think all the conditions will be very, very good, including the conditions of the ground. And the conditions of the ground in England will be okay. I mean, they'll be getting a rest anyway. But the way they have them nowadays, Richie, with the pitches and that, they're first class. And I'd be very surprised if the people in the World Cup don't have the best of stuff.
Yeah. Oh, God knows
in that particular way.
God knows there's the money to do it anyway, to make these things.
Yeah, that'd have to be no problem. That'd be no problem.
On that, because I know you mentioned that it's madness that's being played in the middle of winter and all that stuff, and I would agree with you there. I was born in the middle of a World Cup. I think there'll be others who'd be similar. They'd be born in and around in summers and stuff. And my life is literally measured in World Cups. So this has thrown me off completely, because there was a summer went by where there was a birthday that didn't have a World Cup surrounding it. But apart from that, everybody has their favourite World Cup, or everybody remembers tournaments for being great, just for the play, but there's also the circumstances around them. From an Irish perspective, we'll obviously have Italy 90 and USA 94. But do you feel that regardless of what happens on the pitch, this World Cup is diminished by the circumstances surrounding it?
Well, it is, but I think the strange thing about it, Richie, when the matches start and we get play, I mean, we could get great matches.
Yeah.
Because the players are there, and that's what they're there to do, right? I mean, the circumstances around it are very, 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 very poor, let's put it that way.
Sure.
But I think once the game starts, then it's going to be a game of football, and people will be watching them as a game of football. And I think the conditions will be good. I think the pitches and everything will be perfect for the World Cup. So on the playing side, it could be a very, very good World Cup. I think the players will pay a price when they come back because of the amount of matches they're playing. There'll be a lot of injuries and everything concerned with it, with the World Cup itself. But I think it'll be well organised. I think the pitches will be in good condition, and the players, being players, will do the best they possibly can playing for their country.
Yeah.
So the actual World Cup itself could be on the playing side of it, could be very good.
We hear people about boycotting watching it, or they say that they're not going to watch it. Do you have any misgivings about tuning in and watching it when it's happening? I know you're going to be talking about it for us, obviously enough, so that's probably a stupid question, but is there part of you that's like, I really wish this wasn't happening?
Well, I'll watch it as a football match, Richie.
Right.
And I don't agree with all the circumstances surrounding it. But, the countries themselves who will qualify for the World Cup have their choices, Yeah. I think if they felt strongly about it, as maybe you should, or I think they should, there wouldn't be a World Cup in Qatar. But once they go to play, then they're saying, well, this is okay. There's only one way to go against it, and that's to say we're not going. But that's not the case. It hasn't been the case. Sure. The countries voted for it, or whatever they wanted to do, whatever the system is. That's the way it is. And I think once it comes to the football, then the players who are footballers will go out and do the best they possibly can to win the World Cup.
I wanted to put this story to you because it's connected to the World Cup as well. It popped up today in the Daily Mail saying FA executives were approached by FIFA to make Gareth Southgate available for interviews at half-time during England's World Cup matches, and FIFA are pushing all 32 teams involved in the World Cup to increase their media commitments in order to give more content to their broadcast partners, but have yet to make half-time interviews mandatory. Half-time interviews as a manager, John, would you have been in favour?
It's madness. This is one of the maddest things I've ever heard about football. This is for the television people or the people who are running the game to get more money from it. Half-time in a match, Richie, in my experience, and I'm with most footballers, is one of the most important times in the actual game.
Yeah.
This is when the managers have a touchline. When the manager's on the touchline, he's no control over the players. He can shout all he wants, but when you're playing, you can't hear them, Richie. So the only chance they have, say the fullback is doing something wrong, drive a manager mad, right, because he's over the far side of the field. The only time you can get at him is at half-time. Players, your team is losing 2-0. This is what you have to do. What are you on about? This is one of the biggest parts, most important parts of the manager's job. You have 15 minutes with the players to put things right at half-time over 45 minutes. A very, very difficult thing to do, but a hugely important thing, one of the most important parts of having a manager's job. And they're talking about now letting the cameras into the dressing room or having it. This is madness. This is madness. And I read that same thing in the paper myself. And what I think Southgate has said no, can't do it. He's told he can't do it. But the French manager,
Didier Deschamps.
he's from what I read in the paper, whether it's true or not, he says he's welcome to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what's he going to do? Half time, 40. You've got 15 minutes to get a grip of something that's gone wrong, or right, or whatever you do. I just know as an ex-player that it's one of the most important times of the day, that you get 15 minutes to put things right, and there's always something to put right. And you're the manager, and you're doing a television interview. So who's going to get a grip of it at half-time in the dressing room, which happens to be the most important place for a manager to do? This is madness. This is just television. So of course it's great for the television to have the manager at half-time, and we're all listening to what he's talking about and when he should be in with the players. This is going crazy. This is all money. This is all about money as well. Because the television companies will pay to be able to do it.
What's a manager going to say to the TV presenter at half time as well? Like, is he like say Conte 1-0 down at Bournemouth last Saturday, like somebody grabs a hold of him in the tunnel and says, "Antonio, what do you make of that?" It's like, he's just going to probably rail off a string of expletives that aren't fit for broadcast anyway.
I think what happened there, Richie, Conte, under any circumstances, would agree to it.
Yeah, but I think
under any circumstances,
I think therein lies the attraction to it. Is that maybe if we could get an Antonio Conte to talk about this sort of thing and have somebody who's that wound up to offer a halftime interview, that's the dream for these TV companies. But
it is for the TV people, Richie. I can understand the TV people trying to do it. I can understand that, because that'd be a coup for them. But if you're talking about the game and what's the most important thing. What happens to the team in there? Like, what would happen there in certain ways? You get the manager doing that, and people say, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea," and they go out in the second half. They're losing 2-0, and they go out in the second half and lose 4-0. You soon hear what you want to hear from the spectators and the team and the people who are following. Say Stephen Kenny did that in our team.
God.
Right, and we went out and we were beaten 3-0 or 4-0. There'll be murders going on. So this is a television situation. This is a money situation for the international teams. I can understand a lot of the international teams with the people who are in charge of them saying, "Yeah, that's okay for us. We're getting another 2 million for that." But when you talk about the team and winning matches and being successful, it's absolute madness, Richie. It shouldn't even be spoken about. And for the French manager to agree to it, if that's true, because that's only in the paper, well, then it's an absolute disgrace.
John, I want to throw one final one at you, because Nathan's off at the moment interviewing John Aldridge and Robbie Fowler at an off-air event, and I know I saw Ian Rush is actually in Dublin as well at the moment.
Yeah.
3 amazing strikers. You can only pick one. Which one are you picking?
And it has to be Rushy.
Yeah, and why?
It has to be Rushy. So who are the two other lads?
John Aldridge and Robbie Fowler. So not a bad trio to have. But
no, they're all great players.
Yeah.
But I think Rush was exceptional.
Yeah.
He was exceptional. I mean, the goals he scored, he played with Kenny Dalglish, as we know. But I've never saw a centre forward or a forward work as hard when he didn't have the ball as Ian Rush and scored the goals.
Yeah.
He did. I know he was. I mean, I'm not in. I don't want to.
You're not doing down anybody else. I think they'll be okay either way, John.
The other two lads were terrific players, really top class players. But if you ask my opinion, if I was to pick one, it would definitely be Ian Rush. And
on the other side of the pitch as well, because I know our Shane has been interviewing Ian Rush and Neville Southall. Neville Southall has a documentary about his life and career coming out on Monday. I think it is on BBC Wales. So I think we'd be lucky to get it here. But God, he was a hell of a keeper as well, wasn't he?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
He was one of the best of well, we've had a lot of good goalkeepers over a long period of time. You know, in my period playing time, you had Gordon Banks, for example, who was the Clemens. I can't think of them all, but we had at least 4 or 5.
Pat Jennings in around that generation as well. Yeah,
Pat was probably the best of them all.
Yeah.
If I was to pick all of those, and Gordon Banks and all, these were terrific players.
Yeah.
He had a great temperament and a great ability, Pat. I would have said Pat in my time. I'd pick as the best.
Okay. John, absolute pleasure as always. Hope you have a good week, and we'll talk to you next Thursday.
And you, Richie. Thanks
Cheers,
again.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, watch Chelsea take on Arsenal this Sunday, live on BT Sport.
This is News Talk.